All right, joining me now is a special guest, Sean Mallonee. He's the president of SM Mechanical, someone I met recently while we were discussing issues about the energy crisis going on in Maryland and other states. Sean, welcome, and thank you for joining.
I appreciate you having me.
Sean, tell us a little bit about what you do and why it's relevant to this topic about energy going crazy in Maryland.
So I own a local HVAC company mainly, and a lot of the stuff that we do, obviously, the largest power consuming device in your house is your heating and air conditioning system. So everything that we do business wise revolves around energy and what's good for customers as far as their upfront cost and long term what they're going to get the most out of money wise. So naturally, I pay attention to these kind of things. And we also have, I'm the president of a local trade association for HVAC contractors, which also allows me the opportunity to get a little bit more involved in the legislative aspects of Maryland. There's a lot of laws that are going on that are affecting that. Obviously, everyone's well aware of how high energy bills have come, and one of the things that we kind of see going forward is typically gas prices and grocery prices are front and center on what's very important to people's budgets in their homes. Now, energy has kind of rivaled that, especially in the wintertime and summertime. So, these are the things where we have to start paying attention to what the legislators are doing, who's behind it, and what's the reasoning for it. There's a lot of misinformation. I hate to use that word; it's probably one of the most overused words in the last several
Yeah.
years. But that's exactly what it is, and so I've kind of learned a lot about that and where the truth is coming in on it because obviously if there's scapegoats that aren't the real culprits, that's not going to make any change because then we don't know who to really blame and who to go after and how it's going to affect them.
Right. That's kind of what is behind a lot of people's thoughts, like where is this coming from? And to give you an example, for me personally, I remember, your BGE bill used to be say $150 if you lived in a townhome or a regular, home, maybe 20 years ago. And of course it's gone up, expected to go up over the years, but it was January, and I remember I happened to get an email about my BGE bill, which I know is owned by Exelon, which maybe we'll talk about them in a second here,
Mhm.
and the bill was almost $600. Now I've seen other people talking about their bills have been doubled and they're over 1,000. I kind of put that to my wife had bought some new lights for Christmas and things like that. And then I noticed in February my January bill was almost $600 again. That's when I really started digging into, hey, what's going on? And then I kind of remember some of the things that were going on. So you, you go to Annapolis and represent your trade, and I guess you talk about what's going on. What is it that you're seeing in Annapolis, or other way, or is it the power companies, the energy companies that are actually making these prices skyrocket in Maryland?
So it's a combination of things, right? Some of it is the utility companies. I work a lot with utility companies. I have biweekly meetings with utility companies on some of the things that they're doing, representing contractors, giving our input because we have a lot of the common sense that comes down to us because we're out there, we're sitting at your kitchen table, and we're also residents of the state of Maryland, right? So we're paying our own bills, so we kind of know what affects it, what's good, what's not. So the utility companies are partially to blame. Obviously, everybody, BG victims, Delmarva victims, Exelon, all that. But what everybody has to remember is that utility companies in Maryland are regulated, which means that they don't set the price. They have to submit reports based on what the PSC, the Public Service Commission. They're the ones who are in charge of everything. So they're the ones who affect the rates. They approve the rates, any work, any increases. Those are all things that basically the PSC represents the state. An agenda gets handed down to the PSC, and the PSC they implement that. They ask the utility companies, hey, how much is it going to cost the ratepayers? If you do this kind of work, and then they give multiple scenarios, and then the PSC says, okay, we choose this one. All the scenarios are extremely expensive because the agenda is a green energy agenda, which is ultimately ridiculously expensive. Maryland is already importing roughly 40% of all our electricity today as it stands right now. So obviously, bringing that in, it's coming from another state, and then there's going to be, whatever charges there are for that. We're getting ready to close Brandon Shores Power Plant. We have to supplement that from somewhere else. That's where you're getting into all these transmission lines. The transmission lines are going into Pennsylvania, basically stemming from places like 3 Mile Island, from nuclear, coming from Virginia, whatever it is, whatever makes the most sense. The utility companies, they're not going to do this for free. It's a ton of work, and then it's all tied into the distribution charges. That's where you're going to see the biggest part. And the distribution charges tie into the usage. So when your usage goes up, the distribution charges correlatingly goes up as well. And then on the gas side, if you're somebody who has gas and electric, you're really getting hit twice because there's a law called the Stride Law, legislation that's put in 2013. And what that does is, and this is where on one hand, you got to look at it as the state is pushing this and saying, hey, we want you to do this work, which is going to cost the ratepayers a lot more money. But it's incentivized. So that Stride program, we have some of the probably the oldest gas infrastructure in the entire country around
Mhm.
like the Baltimore, Washington area. So yeah, it does need to be replaced. We need gas. It does need to be replaced, updated. But where the utility companies are taking advantage of this is if you tell a business, here's a law that says that we will incentivize you heavily to do this work and we will pay you for it. What do you think that company is going to do? They're going to take full advantage of it. And they're going to do a hell of a lot of work, and then that bill is being footed by us as the ratepayers. So there's kind of I wouldn't even say equal blame. The majority of the blame does come down to the state because everything right now currently is about electrification. My biggest problem that I have with electrification is it's being it's being spoken about like it's clean.
Yeah.
You have to understand where is the electricity coming from. So it's the old meme of if you have an electric car, you can say
Mhm.
it's not it doesn't have any carbon emissions, but then you see the extension cord, where you have it plugged in, it's going around the corner, and then somebody's pouring gas into a gas generator, and then the exhaust coming
Mhm.
off of that. That's my problem, right? So we're
Yeah.
paying a hell of a lot of money to basically create this electricity using fossil fuels, and then we're pretending that it's clean energy when power plants are spewing all the same carbon emissions. So we're now basically getting uh, the same result, whether it's coming from gas or whether it's coming from electricity. We're paying way more than we should for the same result.
Yeah, it's that adage that you're getting these electric vehicles, but the coal plants are in, say, China. So it's out of sight, out of mind. Well, if it's polluted over there, in a sense, it doesn't matter because I feel good because I'm doing something great here. But you talked about the PSC. Who runs the PSC?
So the PSC, I believe it's Hoover is the chair of the PSC, and these are all there's I believe 4 different people in the PSC, and they go on 5-year terms, I believe,
Hmm.
and they're governor appointed. So
Right.
currently, I believe there are 3 Democrats and 1 Republican, and the 1 Republican, his term is up in June, I believe. So more than likely, we're going to have 4 Democrats that are on there. And, naturally, we already have a very, very green agenda moving forward. If you go back, if you want to do research on it, one of the biggest culprits for all this is the Climate Solution Now Act of 2022. Governor Hogan was very, very much against it. He put out a pretty scathing letter, saying that this is going to be really, really horrible for all Marylanders moving forward. But he didn't veto it, not because he was against it, but because he knew that he was going to be he was going to be outvoted by the legislature. So either way, it was going to pass into law. So he let it sit on his desk and come into law. But that's a huge thing. Another thing that kind of went under the radar recently was last June. Governor Moore enacted an executive order that is going to ban the sale of all gas, oil, and propane equipment in the state of Maryland starting in 2029 for heating systems in your home and also hot water systems. So you live where you live, right? You probably have
Yeah.
gas or oil. So as it stands right now, 2029, if you go to replace your furnace or your water heater and you have gas or oil doing that, you're gonna have to pay a lot of money to convert over to electricity, which could end up being double the cost. So the average cost to replace a system somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000. It might be $20,000 now. So I hope that clean air is really really worth it because most people are not going to be able to afford this.
And people aren't even changing our filters. I have a little bit of knowledge about HVAC stuff, and I know that's a pet peeve for you guys. They're not changing the filters, and who knows what's going to happen with the systems in the future. You talked a little bit about Maryland's importing a lot of their electric, in a sense, from, say, Pennsylvania, with their transmission lines coming from there. Is Pennsylvania actually making any revenue off of exporting that electricity to us?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they're more than willing to increase the amount of electricity because they're making money off of it. Whatever they charge, yeah, there are there are some laws in Maryland where they're supposed to be looking into whatever the cheapest option is. Whether it be out of state or whether it's in state. I have a hard time believing that buying anything, importing anything from out of state is cheaper than producing it yourself when you have the means. So I kind of feel like there's always those chances of everything being manipulated. I'll give you another example of manipulation when it comes to that again. In the Climate Solution Now Act of 2022, one of the things that was included in that was they had to do a study to see if the existing power grid in Maryland could handle full electrification of the state. And I think they had like 3 or 4 months to come back with that information. And we waited on it. And first deadline went by, second deadline went by. It was almost a full year later when they initially had only maybe 3 months. And what do you think? What do you think it came back with? Oh yeah, the state can handle full electrification, which I could have saved them a lot of money. Common sense, we're not even close to handling it. Now here we are with the new AI data centers that
Hmm.
we don't have enough electricity for. We have these transmission lines coming down from Pennsylvania, coming across Carroll County, Frederick County, Baltimore County, that everybody's obviously really outraged about. If our power grid can handle the electrification, why don't we have enough power for the data centers? Why don't we have enough power for these other things? So you can already see there's always manipulation. Everything comes down to what do you want, and then just kind of make the data say that it makes sense even when it doesn't.
I'm glad you brought up the AI data centers because we've seen in like Texas that they're building that infrastructure so that these AI warehouse centers are going into place. A lot of people don't understand what that really is, but something, I live down in Sparrows Point, and there's been a lot of talk about what's happened with Bethlehem Steel and what they've been replacing things with here. That's something I thought, what, if we had that type of work with AI and we could lead, be the leader in the AI infrastructure, that'd be amazing. You're outside DC. You have a lot of people in that 270 corridor, also who are, they're scientists. They're working with AI type stuff. Penn State is known for engineering and their science programs. Maryland's an engineering school. These are a great place to have the AI. We don't have the infrastructure to be able to handle that. That our politicians in this state will just basically sugarcoat it or lie in a sense and say, yeah, we have enough. But then when push comes to shove, we find out we really don't. Why? What are they gaining from actually not telling us the full truth?
Well, I think what they're gaining is that you still have to fall within your party lines, within your party agenda. And right now, the most important thing is electrification, right? Because everything is about carbon emissions being reduced. We obviously have to bring in AI. One of the biggest problems that we have, and I think with this new budget bill that just passed, that they just talked about last week, that they've been arguing about, obviously this multi-billion-dollar budget deficit.
Mhm.
We have to find the money to pay for whatever it is that we're doing. I mean, the nice thing about Maryland that separates us from a lot of other states that do a lot of spend and tax like we do is that the Maryland Constitution does state we have to have a balanced budget every year.
Yeah.
If California, New Jersey, and a lot of these other states like that had the same type of constitution, they wouldn't be in the dire straits they are financially because they just continue to spend whether they got it or not, and then figure out how to pay for it later. Maryland, we have to account for that. But you also see now we're just getting silly with all the increased taxes. And the biggest thing is, and this is another one of those lies or manipulations, whatever you want to call it, me being a business owner, I know this firsthand. The Whether you say that businesses need to pay their fair share, or we're going to increase corporate taxes, business taxes, whatever you want to call it, these are all indirect taxes to consumers, and it's becoming more and more business unfriendly. Several years ago, the state was on the right track of being business friendly. What happens when you're business friendly? Not only do you create new jobs, but you also invite investors from out of state. Maryland has a lot of upside with all the connections we have being in the backyard of DC. So we get a lot of federal money. The state is the richest state in the entire country per capita, which kind of says a lot for how small we are. But we have a lot of the military complex, a lot of a lot of the engineering that goes into
Federal.
the DC. We don't take enough advantage of that. And one of the big things that you just saw recently in the last week was Delegate Crosby. He's pretty prominent in the Democratic Party, for Maryland. He has his own company, and it's a IT company, and he's moving that company to Virginia because he said that his company would go out of business within 6 months with the new taxes that are being implemented on businesses in this new bill. All in all, this is not good for Maryland because as companies do leave, that's less tax money, and then we have to increase taxes in other ways. So just less and less business value.
Yeah, now businesses, well, someone like you're from the area. You went to Calvert Hall. We were just talking about that as well. You're a Miami Hurricane alum. I'm a Notre Dame guy, so we'll get into that another time. But the, you came back and you started your own business here, and this is kind of what America's all about. You got a family guy who grows up in an area, and you end up creating jobs, and you're doing something. It's not the most glamorous work, doing HVAC stuff, or mechanical type stuff, but you understand that this is what people need. So, with a person like you, everyday type American, who sees like Delegate Crosby say, "I'm voting for something even though it hurts me," and he's moving his business. Why is it that businesses can still stay afloat? And what are your thoughts? Like, you're tied here, but would you move your business if things continue to get worse and go to another state?
So I'll tell you this much: I'm very jealous of Delegate Crosby because he's got a business that he's able to just pick up and move.
Yeah,
When you have a business that doesn't, it's not a brick and mortar business. I mean, we're not in retail, per se. We're not selling anything where I can ship it, but we're closer to brick and mortar than he is because
yeah.
I have employees, I have a customer base. I can't just pick that up and move that, somewhere else. And I'm finding myself more and more saying like I'm not going anywhere. I love Maryland, but it's getting tough, man. I just bought some property up in Falston in Harford County, but I am local. I'm from Essex. I live in Joppa right now in Harford County, but yeah, obviously if I'm getting ready to build a house, that kind of tells you I'm not planning on going anywhere, anytime soon. And as long as I'm a business owner, which I plan on being, it's kind of I'm torn. Do I want to be here? Do I not want to be here? But I'm kind of I'm rooted. So yeah, if I could, I absolutely would.
Yeah, I own a few properties. I don't usually talk about it, but I have a few properties in Hartford County myself. And I sold everything I have in Baltimore County except where I live right now. And it's because it's a little more friendly to work and live in Hartford County than it is in Baltimore County. And that's just a local indication of what's coming with the state. We've seen this mass exodus of people that left Baltimore City from, over a million when you and I were kids to a little over 500,000 now. They go into the counties and then they continue to get pushed and squeezed. So they leave the state and they move into Pennsylvania, which I owned a house in Pennsylvania as well because I was like, I was looking for friendlier options, but people have left this state in a sense, and they're going to be continuing to leave because of the federal jobs that are going to be lost, which is a whole nother subject. So Maryland, in a sense, is going to be really strong with how they're going to bring in revenue. They can only tax people like you and me a certain amount. So obviously, you kind of talked about the Democrat Party in Maryland, how they have the agenda, which is green energy. Whether that's actually a thing that will make a difference or not, that's a whole nother discussion. Generally, a lot of people will believe that it's a scam, and there's some benefit into some of these things that they're doing. We don't want clean, we don't want dirty air and dirty water, obviously, but some of this stuff it seems like it's a money grab. But who else in Annapolis do can we count on and go to say, hey, this is what we need to support this type of person because they're putting forth legislation that actually is for the everyday Marylander? Is there anybody down there that is a friend to regular people like us?
I mean, yeah, obviously, there's if you look at who's voting on what, there's a lot of Republicans, that are very active in that, and naturally, the Republicans when they come out, Morgan and Graham, people like that, they're really the easiest thing to say is they're telling the truth. There's a lot of conjecture. There seems to be mainly conjecture from the Democrat Party because if it's not true, well then spin it or focus on the things that kind of push people away from common sense, right? Um, when you're bringing in all these jobs and tout like Governor Moore is touting that he's creating all these jobs, a government job, you can't take credit as creating a job when it's not bringing in its own revenue to pay for itself. It's not a private business. It's not me hiring people. That's creating a job. When you hire 5,000 new employees in the last 2 years, and then that adds to the budget deficit, you can't claim that you created 5,000 jobs. You created more tax needs to pay for those jobs. You had already mentioned about a lot of the federal jobs that are lost recently. Well, we're hiring them. We're putting an open invite in there. Come work for the state of Maryland, and we'll pay you what your wages that you lost. I think what the expectation is on those 2,000 jobs is that that's going to be an additional $2 billion per year annually between salaries, wages, and benefits. Who's paying for this? Then when you start hearing about, oh yeah, here's the new sleep tax, and here's the new IT tax, and here's the new this, that, and the other, it's crazy. And then some of the balances, you hear, Delegate Moon, he's on the Democrat side, he's a big proponent of increasing taxes. Every time I turn around, he's got the last one that's very, very anti-business, which is anti-consumer in Maryland, is to drop the sales tax, a little bit of give and take. Tell me if this maths up. Uh, Take the sales tax that's currently at 6%, drop it down to 5%, but then we want to add a 5% tax to all service companies. So every HVAC, roofer, accountant, every single service that you don't currently pay a tax on, you're going to add 5%. Um, that's going to be a lot more than that 1% drop. So to me, that's where we're at. We're doing a lot of things that are not common sense to add revenue, and it's basically death by a thousand cuts if you're a resident of Maryland.
Right. Delegate Moon, I believe he's from Montgomery County, so it's a whole other animal in that area. But as a business owner, a lot of people don't understand. If you pay an employee, let's just say $50,000 a year, the taxes that you as a business owner also have to pay would probably come to a total of about $100,000 a year. Is that correct?
Sure.
Right. So a lot of people don't understand when these taxes go into effect, it's not just that the average person is paying more, it's also the businesses, you are still paying more, which means your prices go up. And then of course it just becomes harder and harder to stay afloat. And that's why a lot of businesses will leave, like Delegate Crosby's maybe.
Mhm.
So it becomes a never-ending cycle where it seems like in a state like ours, where these energy costs continue to go up, it's not friendly to businesses. It's not friendly to the everyday user. People end up leaving the state until the state becomes basically non-existent because there's no tax base anymore. So if you were the governor and you had complete control, this would be my final question on this subject, but what would you do to help everyday Marylanders and businesses to actually have a break from these exorbitant costs, and how would you grow the businesses in a sense, if you had complete control and you didn't have to worry about the general asylum or general assembly as what it's really called, but what would you do?
I mean, it's kind of a common sense thing. Again, God forbid you use common sense, but um, the biggest thing is to decrease spending, right? Because if we decrease spending, if we get rid of a lot of the waste, that's a big thing everybody's talking about now is government waste. I know Florida just they just kind of did their own little Doge thing and they handed back $800 million back to the federal government because they just didn't need it. So imagine what they're doing as far as the tax base. But then there's a reason why they don't have income tax in a lot of those states. So they must be doing something right. Um, I would be looking at those kind of states and mirror it because, for one, it's the whole Laffer effect, right? You can only tax people so much before, if you tax them at 100%, you're going to get zero because they're going to leave, and then you're not going to have anything to tax. So we're way past that on that spectrum. We need to look at some of those states that somehow have 0% income tax that are doing very, very well. And part of the reason they're doing well is because they're also becoming very appealing for people to come there. So Florida, for instance, Texas, they're taking a ton of people away from New York, New Jersey, California, places that are extremely high taxes. Maryland, you're going to hear a lot of people going to Florida and places like that from Maryland now. It's going to be the next one because people are getting sick of it. So we need to go back to the things that make it good to live here, which would be lower taxes. We have big cities. We need to take advantage of that. McCormick's is talking about leaving now because they're fed up. I mean, they're really the only Fortune 500 company we have in the Baltimore area, and this is not the first time that they've threatened to leave
Right.
over a poor business climate. That should say a lot. That should be a wake up call. But the same thing that's happening in New Jersey, where you rely on these taxes. As soon as people retire, they move away, and then you're paying their pensions. That we need to kind of understand that. And if I was governor, I would be looking to immediately cut a lot of spending. It's not going to be good for a lot of people, but a lot of those people they're getting free rides as it is because they're not really helping anything, especially not on the taxpayers' dime. So I'd be looking to do that. I'd be looking to cut taxes on businesses instead of increase taxes. Just energy's huge. I would kind of be out the door with a lot of these green energy concepts because it's 2025. You have to look at how clean cars are burning. You have to look at how clean gas is. We've made a lot of technological improvements that make everything completely different. You don't look at it as just carbon, like dirty, sooty, stuff that's just kind of blown away. I'm a big believer in self-policing and capitalism. As far as the more capitalism you have, the more competition you have, and you're naturally going to be looking to make your product better and cheaper. So if we continue to kind of use those things like gas is clean energy as far as I'm concerned right now. When you're at mid 90%, use that because it's so much more cheaper. But that'll unlock a lot, and we just refuse to do that. We refuse to take what we have and make it better. We just want to switch everything over and then ignore the cost.
I remember as a kid in the 80s seeing people frequently throwing trash out of their car windows when we were driving. You don't see that very much now. So that is like some self policing. And when that does happen, you will hear stories from people in the community that pull that person over or say something to that person and say, "What are you doing? That's my neighborhood," or just pick that up. So I agree with you there completely. How can people find your business? And is there any social media that you like to give out about yourself?
Sure. I mean, we're obviously on Facebook. You can look up SM Mechanical. We just won in 2024. We won Baltimore Sun's Baltimore Best. For customers, we were voted on to that, so we're very proud of that. And then just recently, we won Hartford's Best, also in Baltimore Sun. So again, very very proud of that. So you can look us up. Our website, everything that we've. I started the business back in 2009, just working out of my house and just being a one man doing it with a helper, and we're currently at 22 employees. So, I mean, I have to pat myself on the back a little bit because everything
Yeah.
that we're talking about, it's extremely hard to build a business nowadays. A lot of businesses are, especially post COVID, are going out of business. We're growing. We're finding new ways, new services. One of our taglines is "We treat your home like it's our own." It's something that we feel very genuine about, and it's another reason why I'm very passionate about some of the opportunities that I'm having down in Annapolis, talking to people, working with people, because again, it's this state is my state as well. I'm going to make money either no matter what. I've had some back and forth from some judges on the PSC, and I really don't care because I'm not paid to be there. And in one instance, I was told, you don't really care because you're a business owner, you're making money. And I said, look, I got news for you. I'm going to make money either way. If you tell me that I can give customers very, very good options, then I can sit back and kind of empathize and say, hey, let me ask you a couple questions. If I live in your house, this is what I would do. If I'm you, and based on the answers you give me, how long you're going to live here, what are you looking at? This is what I would do, and I can be very genuine in doing that. And all of my employees are the same way. But if you kind of narrow that down to no options because of an agenda, I'm probably going to possibly make more money because now I have to charge you a lot more money to do things that I otherwise wouldn't have to do. But I'm also a resident of the state of Maryland, so these are the things that are going to affect me on a personal level. In fact, I've got twin girls, Rowan and Tegan, and they're getting ready to turn 8 years old. I want them to be part of this business in the future,
Yeah.
and I want to be the best that I can for them. So same thing, they're not going to be able to move this business if they wanted to. So they're going to be rooted in Maryland. I hate to say stuck in Maryland, but we kind of it's what it is. But prefer to say rooted in Maryland. Kind of take a
Mhm.
good.
Someone who has a similar background to you, running business, doing coming back to Maryland in a sense, I can respect and appreciate what you're doing because it's not just that you are involved in your personal stuff and business, it's that you're also giving back. And it just means that you are doing a civic duty and you're being a public servant by actually representing your employees, other businesses, and your community. And many people ask how they can get involved. Look, politics sucks. A lot of people who know me know I'm involved in politics. It sucks. It brings your family into things, and it ruins careers, and it's all kinds of stuff. But being a public servant and doing something like what you're doing is extremely worthwhile. We should support people like you and your employees as well, because you are actually trying to help us. So help you, yeah, help us, yeah, something like that. But anyway, Sean, I want to say thank you for coming on. I know it's your first time ever doing a podcast, and it's Sean Mallonee. Took me a second to get that, but mine's Faze and Baker, so I get that all the time. So Sean, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you out in the community. And anytime something's going on with energy, we will be talking to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hope to see you again.